hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good evening, Melbourne. Good evening,
Father?
Brendan.
Oh, hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and can you hear me?
I can hear you.
This is the first time that I've ever heard myself back whilst speaking. Oh, and classic. I'm still learning.
We're trying a new setup tonight for those of you who have been following along. It's the second time we've actually been in the same room together.
On the podcast.
On the podcast.
Live stream. Thanks for everyone listening.
But it's great to be back. For what episode are we up to? I always lose a bit of count.
13.
13.
I think, yeah.
Unlucky for some.
But not for us.
No.
Because 13 was the number of the disciples plus Jesus. So in fact, this is the greatest number of all. That's my yeah.
That's you stick with it.
Let's ride that wave.
That's your reasoning, and you're going to stick with it. And we had all that bad luck early on in the piece, so nothing more can go wrong with the podcast.
Yes, that's the episode that we don't speak of. In fact, that's not even part of the count. This is technically 14, but we don't speak about that one.
The one where we broke the internet.
Yeah, that one.
Well, so if you are listening live tonight here in Melbourne or wherever you're listening from on YouTube, make sure if you do have any comments or questions, you add them to the com box, because we really like to engage with whoever's listening with us live this evening. But otherwise, if you're joining us later in the week, hopefully it's just as engaging. A full night this week, but it's our anniversary, because on this day last year we arrived in Rome, if you remember.
Yes, I do.
It's the feast of St. Peter and Paul.
Of course,
and we
yeah.
were luckily able to be there last year for the Pallium Mass with Archbishop Comensoli. So
That was beautiful. Wait, so we arrived the day before it happened,
the day
right?
before the Mass, I think, didn't we? The night before?
Yep. All right, so this is the anniversary of us arriving.
Yeah, so...
That was a good Mass. That was beautiful.
It was. And how strange has the world been? You weren't with us a couple of weeks ago when we spoke with Father Michael Buck, who's still obviously in Rome, and he was explaining how it's such a strange place to be at the moment, because it's Rome without the tourists. And especially at this time of year in the middle of summer, it's normally bustling with tourists.
Those
and
poor gelati places.
There. Exactly. But it's a big year since then. But
yeah, that was a trip and a half. That was really good.
But a big shout out to Archbishop Comensoli. So we were there, and we were glad to be, I suppose, representatives of the Archdiocese of Melbourne, our pilgrim group, as he received the pallium. That's that wonderful sign of his role as leader, not only of the church here in Melbourne, but of the regional church of Victoria. So.
And in case anyone listening who has no idea what we're talking about, once a year, it's been once a year for the past 3 years?
It's right. It's on the
year.
Feast of St. Peter and Paul every year. Yeah.
Oh well, no, I was going to talk about the Camino.
Oh, the
in
Camino.
general.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I know that masses happen every year for the Feast of St. Peter and Paul. But once a year, you've taken a group of young men on the Camino, which is a walk in Spain. We did 500 kilometers when we did it last year, and we just headed off to Rome just before then.
For the Pallium Mass.
For the Pallium Mass. That's why we were there. And then, Camino. Such good memories. I always look back on that.
And this was the time. So can you remember from there? Was there a particular memory that sticks with you from that Camino experience?
From the Camino as a whole? Oh. No, you've caught me on the spot. It was the first time I'd ever been in Europe, and just seeing the churches with all the history was wonderful.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. What you loved that group. Let's admit.
We're not allowed to have favourites. I know. Like fathers aren't allowed to have favourites amongst their children. Priests aren't allowed to have favourites amongst their pilgrim groups.
Oh, but it was a really good group. Really good group. Shout out to any of those Camino boys who were watching. Good men.
Yeah. Great. Shout out to Isabella and William and Primrose and Emily and Clara, who have all said hello in the combox this evening. Thanks for reaching out. Brendan, 2 weeks now we've been doing your top 5. Brendan's top 5. Top 5. We're going to create a
Brendan's top 5.
We're going to create a theme, a little individual theme.
Yeah, something with actually with good music as opposed to whatever that is at the start of our podcast. Still not a fan.
It's growing on me. I'm actually really
No,
enjoying
you've loved it the whole way. Don't say
that's to tell you the truth, I have. So, your top 5 this week.
Yeah.
You didn't pull any punches. You've decided to go right to the sort of
to the source of it.
Source. Top 5 Catholic books of all time.
Top 5 far out of all time. Look, this will probably change over the years, but these were the 5 that just came to mind as good books.
And are we talking fiction or non-fiction?
I got a mix. So I kind of want to... These top 5 are a bit of a mix of all of my faves. From different genres as well. There's competing ones, you know? So... Let's go into it, yeah?
Yeah, let's go into it. I did get a bit of a sneak peek as you took them out of your bag before.
Yeah, that's right.
I know there's a couple of bingo moments here. So
yep, so here we go.
Number 5. Are these in order or are these in no particular order?
That are in an order. Well, actually, no, the way I'm putting it is that there's no order, but number 1's number 1 for a reason.
Okay.
So it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts.
Okay. Are they your top 5?
I'm just kidding. That was a really crappy joke. They're the books of the Bible because they're all individual books and they're great. The Gospel's on top. And then Acts, that's how we live. Anyway, the reason why I said that is because I wanted to mention the Bible. Obviously, the Bible has primacy.
There's not even a question.
It's not even a question. It is the greatest book, the greatest Catholic book of all time. Yep. Number 1 right there, no doubt.
No questions asked.
No questions asked. But it's not making this top 5 list because it's technically a collection of books.
Okay.
And I've just kind of excluded it because it's there. So this is the top 6.
Okay, and if you are listening live, as you can see, there's a few people who have added some things into the combox already. So make sure you add them in, and we'll see whether yours make the list of Brendan's top 5. Number 5.
And as soon as I'm reading them, I'm like, this top 5 is probably not accurate. Okay, let's go straight into it. Number 5, Story of a Soul.
Yep, it's actually here on the desk. So.
Which I read on the Camino, and I have distinct memories of being. Should I bring this up?
Well, I have a terrible feeling that you're about to.
Yeah, so I'm laying there reading through, and you're like, you said to me, Brendan, why are you reading the diary of a 16-year-old girl? And I'm like, excuse me.
I don't think that's exactly how it happened.
And it was like the little pink on it, and it wasn't really helping my case. It didn't make a great impression on other travelers, Camino goers.
I do have a great devotion to Saint Teresa of Lisieux, and
I'm seeing the book here. You have it yourself, yeah.
And we've discussed this before. There's a great part of my vocation story that I attribute to her intercession in particular. And we're only talking with another priest today about the fact that it was so sad this year that her relics, which came to Australia just as COVID-19 hit, and there was this great pilgrimage of her relics around the country that hadn't happened for almost 20 years, because the last time they came was in the year that I was discerning my vocation, and I entrusted a great chunk of my discernment to her because she was very sure of her own vocation from a very young age. So I really entrusted it to her, and I believe that she interceded greatly. So it was really exciting to see that her relics were coming back to Australia, along with the relics of her parents. We were seeing the whole family sort of on tour, just as COVID-19 hit. So we never had a chance to sort of see the fruits of that again, and there was many fruits from her last visit. So, but
you can see why that's hit the top 5. Yeah. I think that's a classic. That's one of those ones that it's worth, if you're wondering what you should read, this is definitely one of them.
But it does sometimes read like a diary of a teenage girl. And I don't say that in a pejorative sense, but there is sometimes it gets a little bit it's not.
It gets a bit much.
Yeah.
What did I say? I hit points in this book where I'm just like, okay, thank you. That's just so far beyond me, and just so like she's very emotional.
Yeah.
And it's just a bit hard to connect with sometimes. But and I had to pray that to not judge her, because there's points in it you're just like, are you really that holy? That's just like next level of. Anyway, that's number 5.
There is she'll come up later in the podcast because a bit of a reference to Saint Teresa a little bit later on. But I'll leave you in suspense. Number 4.
Number 4. It's got to be this. To save 1,000 souls. So this is the. If you're a young man in Melbourne and you haven't received this book yet,
there's thousands of copies.
There are
in
thousands of
circulation.
copies ready and waiting to be fired at you. I think I have 5 at home, and they're given out. There are some other men out there that know exactly what I'm talking about, but I pass them on as well. It's a really excellent book, and it was very helpful for me discerning as well. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful book to read. And even for someone who isn't discerning, if you're a parent and you want to understand maybe what that would be like for your son, like the heart behind it, it captures the priesthood very beautifully.
And it's not a classic. It's a very modern book. So it sneaks into your top 5. I was very surprised when you mentioned that was in your top 5. So it's written by Father Brett Brennan, who was a long-time vocations director in America. And it really is a bit of a one-stop shop for a young guy who's looking at the discernment of a vocation. And he really points out in it that every young guy should read it as part of his maturing in his Catholic faith. So, but a bit of good cross-promotion here, because it's the book that we're using on Wednesday nights in our other podcast on Melbourne Praise, which is Discernment Straight Up.
Discernment Straight Up.
And so we're going, it's because it's too important to talk about sitting down. So,
good byline. I like the logo. That's a great logo as well.
It's great. So JC Napoli's a 6-year seminarian, and I are working our way through to save 1,000 souls in that Wednesday night podcast. So if you don't have a copy but you want to get through the content, you can find that podcast on Google Play and in the iTunes store.
Yes, 100%. And I think if you get in contact with the vocations office, they will probably happily send it to you.
Always happy
or you
to
can come
pass
and
it
pick it
around.
up.
Now, here we go.
All right. No. I've lost the order. What was the order here? I'll go with this one. Yeah, no. This one. It would be kind of wrong if the other ones got below this. Okay. This is not a really popular one, but a fiction had to hit the list. It's a Catholic fiction. Father Elijah. Have you read it before?
I have. It's on my list.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So
it's really good. It's really good. It's the best Catholic fiction that I've ever read.
Yeah.
It's the only Catholic fiction I've ever read. But I loved it. Like, there are pieces in here that are just so on point. And I feel like, he just captures the characters really well. And a bit emotional sometimes reading it.
Yeah, and I believe that there's a sequel to Father Elijah that's come out more recently, and I haven't seen it. There's quite a number of books in the series from Michael O'Brien, but this is a great one. I completely agree with this.
Without ruining it, it's Father Elijah. It's called Father Elijah. Byline is a subtitle is An Apocalypse. So it's talking about if the apocalypse were to happen in our modern age, what would that actually, just hypothesizing what that would look like. And this, I don't want to spoil it, but that's worth reading. That's number 3.
Number 2,
a classic. Really, it had to be on the list. The Imitation of Christ.
Yeah, I think it's probably on on a lot of bedside tables. It comes in lots of formats. It's available anywhere and everywhere. It's one of those great ones that you don't necessarily read from beginning to end, but that you can duck in and out of all the time.
I'm
Which
really
is what
excited.
we say when we've never read a book from beginning to an end, but
Apparently, I think. Well, because I've skimmed through it one time. Later on in the book, he's writing as though it were Christ speaking to you. Is that right?
Yeah, I have to admit that I've never read it from beginning to end.
Right,
it's one of those books that I've ducked in and out.
But it's really beautiful. I think the emphasis on humility in this book and how that's something really to desire is that humility and that closeness to God.
Okay, so that's number
Beautiful.
4. But before you give us your
Number 2.
Number
That's number 2.
So before you give us your top one, there's been a number of suggestions here.
Ooh,
in the
talk to me,
Combox.
people.
So a number of people have taken a bit of a problem with my description of the story of a soul as a diary of a 16-year-old girl. But I say it with all respect.
And love.
So what have we got here? A couple of people have suggested Harry Potter. Or one person has suggested Harry Potter, not technically Catholic, but with Christian themes. Everlasting Man.
There's
by
a good
G.K.
debate
Chesterton,
right there.
top pick. The Way of Perfection by St. Teresa of Avila.
She's hard to read. She's really hard to read.
Of course, the Bible. St. Teresa's autobiography. So there's a lot of love here for St. Teresa of Avila and St. Teresa of Lisieux, the Carmelite saints. So you're going to appreciate a little bit of our chat.
Father Elijah is also about a Carmelite priest as well.
Yes.
So there we go. All right. Well, number 1.
Here we go. I don't actually know. I didn't see this
Oh,
one.
didn't you? Good. I'm glad. Okay, this one is a Jason Everett book.
Oh, okay.
It's If You Really Loved Me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Of all your books.
This is the one, apart from the Bible, I think this is the one that really hit my heart. And I would consider it a conversion experience reading it.
Wow.
My sister gave me that very book. It's like quite a number of years ago. I think I was 16 or 15, and it just came at the perfect time. If every young person should read a Jason Everett book or listen to anything that's along that line. Like if you haven't heard a good talk on chastity and why that virtue is worth fighting for in this culture, then you just haven't heard. All you've been fed then is what the world's narrative is on it, and the world does not paint virtue, chastity, abstinence, or any of that in a positive light. But the way that Jason Everett puts it, which is the Catholic Church's stance, is it gives that it's a heroic thing. It's a heroic and beautiful thing that is so worth fighting for, and that when you fight for it, it gives you a fire, and it gives you the gift of your body is an incredible, beautiful, precious gift. And Pope John Paul II really helped us to see that. And Jason Everett is heavily inspired, along with Christopher West and all of these great speakers and writers that have come out since. But yeah, just reading this book, I urge every young Catholic, every parent to make sure that their children have read a book from Jason Everett, or at least if you don't read, go listen to a podcast that he's done.
We had him out here in Melbourne a couple of years back, and every time he comes, he draws a crowd. So the fact that his book is number 1 on your top 5, I think that means that he needs to come on the podcast.
Oh, that would make me cry.
Shout out last week to the Crunch.
Cry.
Shout out this week to Jason Everett. And I actually saw Jason Everett. I was at a Focus conference in Phoenix, Arizona at the start of the year, and I saw him and I had a good chat with him, and he remembers fondly his time here in Australia and meeting all of the young people here in Australia. So shout out to anyone who's got contacts with Jason Everett. Would love him on the podcast.
I bought like 30 books of this because I just give it out. I just want people to read it. Yeah, it's such a beautiful
Do you know the amazing thing about him at this conference? If you know, this was a conference, 8,000 university students, and it had one of those big expo spaces like we see at so many of these events. And he had his stall, and without, no exaggeration, he manned that stall on his own for every minute of the day that the stalls were, and he spoke with every young person that came and spoke to him. I was just really edified by his missionary zeal and his willingness just to talk with absolutely every young person who came up to speak to him. And I was exhausted just watching how much he was working at this festival. So there you go, Jason Everett. Do you know it's on my shelf. I haven't read it, but I'm gonna take it off the shelf and put it on the coffee table and
read through it. The structure of it's really good. So it's 100 questions on dating, relationships, and sexual purity, I think. Yeah, and they're just good, very good responses, solid. This particular book is aimed for teenagers, I think, they're kind of asking things about school and so, which is why it was perfect for me when I was 16. But he's done another book what is it called? The Dating Blueprint.
Okay.
That's a very recent one that he's put out, and that's excellent. That's very good for any young man. If you need some advice and some guidance, and need a bit of a blueprint, then The Dating Blueprint is a very, very good book along the same line, but just good for young men.
And Isabella in the combox speaks about How to Find Your Soulmate, which is another one from his.
Which is perfect for, I think it's written by his wife.
Oh, is that the girls' one?
And that's the girls' one. That's, yeah, and for what I've heard, very good one to read.
Fantastic.
For women.
William agrees with us to get Jason Evan on the podcast. So there we go. It's time, Jason. We're giving you the shout out all the way from across the seas here.
Please do, yeah.
We'd love to have you on if this gets across. I've got a couple. So obviously a number of these are great suggestions. I didn't know whether we were going fiction or non-fiction.
Okay. So you went for non-fiction.
Well, I went for one and one.
Nice. Okay, good.
So a little bit like Father Elijah in the non-fiction. In the fiction section.
Yes.
Is one called Lord of the World by Robert Hugh Benson.
Is that Catholic?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
It's very similar. It's apocalyptic. It really sucks you in. I'm just trying to remember exactly when it was written. But it's so prophetic in a number of ways about the times that we're living in now. So Lord of the World is well worth a read. Another one that I read, and we spoke about this a couple of weeks back on the Wednesday night podcast, is called The Mission by Robert Bolt. And
fiction or non-fiction, sorry?
That's fiction.
Yeah.
So and it's about some Jesuit missionaries in the Amazon, I'm pretty sure. A really interesting read. When it comes to non-fiction, I think, and I had a quick look through. And we'll pop this one into the combox. But there's a great article that was written a number of years back by a priest friend of mine by the name of Father John Corrigan from the Ballarat Diocese about 15 books that every young Catholic should read. And we republished it recently as 15 Catholic books to get you through social isolation.
Cool.
So I had a look, and he pointed to a book that was a reminder to me, and I don't think it's on my shelf because I constantly give it away and then have to buy a new copy for myself. But it's called Prayer for Beginners by Peter Kreeft.
Yeah.
And it's a really small book, but a really basic introductory book for people to learn how to pray. And I think, especially as young Catholics, we sometimes presume that people know how to pray. And we put people in a church and we put people before the Blessed Sacrament, but we've never actually taught them what to do in that time. And I was definitely like that, if you know what I mean. I'd spent a lot of time praying, and I knew sort of the basic prayer of talking to the Lord and asking him questions, but that only will get you so far. And there's lots of ways of needing to depth your prayer life. This little book, I read it in my second year in the seminary, and it really was very beneficial in my growth in prayer. So I would put Peter Kreeft's Beginner's Guide to Prayer pretty high up there on my list of spiritual books, but also any number of books, and if you can find anything by the spiritual writer Father Jacques Philippe. And again, they're very short.
He's
books.
on my honourable mentions.
There's a couple here. Called to Life, I think, is one that I've just been recommending to a few people. It really helps you if you're looking at the question of discernment and God's will in your life. So, but anything by Father Jacques Philippe is well worth the read. And again, they're short, like they're not.
They're very approachable.
Someone asked me the other day whether I have Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, and I'm like, no.
I should get that for you.
It's like
that would fit nicely.
Would fit nicely.
Just
on
remove the whole bottom.
Shelf.
Yeah, that's right.
And it would have to stay up there because it would never get read. If you know what I mean. It's one of those things that. Well, I'm sure lots of people read it, and there's lots of people who get a lot out of it. But I'm more of a short, pithy sort of books kind of guy.
That's right.
So anything by Father Jacques Philippe.
Interior Freedom is on my special mention list, and also Lucia in Fatima's own words. Fatima in Lucia's own words, which you gave to me last year. Very beautiful, because before I read that book, my whole perception of the children of Fatima, because the only interaction I'd ever had with them or known of them was just the photos that were taken of them, and they look like the grumpiest bunch of kids.
There is actually, even on the outside of the basilica, is the two sort of beatification photos. It's like, are they the only ones you could find? Surely there was... But someone said if you'd seen a vision of hell...
That's right. You wouldn't.
That's probably what you'd be looking like as well.
They probably... Well, in the book, they are joyful, very, very joyful in the books, and their love for each other as well is just beautiful. But I imagine it's just like, they're like, what is this contraption in front of me? Because they're not used to, like, they're not like us now. It's like, smile for the camera. It's, yeah, there's probably some massive box thing that was shoved in front of them.
We'd like to JC, who got an honourable mention early in the podcast, is now trolling us in the combox, and he's
wonderful.
He has pointed out that the seers at Fatima were also very poor, so they probably that might have been why they didn't have a lot to smile about as well. So thanks very much for that, JC.
They were rich.
And William has pointed out that cameras were very slow to take photos in those times. So that's
true.
There we go. So
smile.
We need to be a little bit more charitable, I think, Brendan, in our approach to the Seers of Fatima.
Well, now I know.
Very holy. But yes, Fatima in Lucia's words, I think, is a great book. It's not always easy to find here in Australia, and that's why when we go to Fatima, I get copies and give it to people there, because it's not always easy to find over here in bookshops. But it's her account. It's well, she's not a saint yet, but it's Lucia's account of the apparitions at Fatima. Written at obedience to the bishop. So a little bit like Story of a Soul. So St. Therese wrote that out of obedience. She didn't want to write her own autobiography, but she wrote it out of obedience to the bishop. So a good lesson for all of us there about obedience and doing what we're told, because there can be lots of spiritual fruits afterwards. Okay, so that's your top 5 for this week. Have
That's
we got
my
an idea
top 5.
What your top 5 will be for next week?
Absolutely no idea. Let's find out. Oh, if anyone's got any recommendations, please chuck that in the com box.
Yeah, if anyone's got a recommendation for Brendan's top 5 for next week, make sure you send it through. The scriptures this weekend were a wonderful treasure trove at Masses. Again, aware that some of you might not have got to a Mass this weekend, but hopefully you had an opportunity to pray in your homes or in other ways, or to enter into the liturgy through sort of means online. But we had those the great texts that at first glance, the gospel in particular is one of those ones that that sort of can be very confronting early on. So we had from the Gospel of Matthew, and there's a little section that we didn't have in the Gospel at Mass, but that precedes the text, and it's that section that, do not think that I've come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but the sword. For I come to set man against father and daughter, daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and man's foes will be those of his own household. So we didn't get that section directly in the Gospels, but then we get the question, we do get the section, he who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves the son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He who does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. So it's pretty challenging. It's like, here's Jesus sort of saying, don't love your mother and father. And to parents, don't love your children. And that can be really confronting as a text. But when we look at it more deeply, we see that what is he saying? He's saying that at the very core of our being, what is that primary relationship? It's not with anything on this earth, but it's a relationship with him and with God the Father. And that we're called to die to the world, die to everything in this world in order to take up the cross and to follow him. And that is like that particular challenge for each one of us. And this is where St. Therese of Lisieux and St. Teresa of Avila come in. I spoke to the people here this weekend about the great example of St. John Paul II. And I remember as a young man in particular, by the time my memories of St. John Paul II there of my own, if you know, not memories that I've learnt of later on, but my first memories are of this old man riddled with Parkinson's disease. And here was a man that had so totally died to the world, so totally given himself completely to the service of the Lord that it was obvious on his face. And it was one of the most inspiring things as a young man I could ever see. And I often say this in schools when I talk about St. John Paul II, it's really quite sort of tragic now that there's this whole generation of young people who've grown up and don't actually remember him. I show photos of him as that, there's those iconic photos of him as a young priest sort of canoeing or bike riding or going hiking. And I show these black and white photos and ask sort of groups of 16-year-olds if they can acknowledge, if any of them can recognize who the photo is of, and they can't. And it breaks my heart because for a generation of young Catholics, he was just so inspirational, but just such an example of what Jesus is talking of in the gospel. And a good priest who I saw today was saying that we've got to remember that he took this example because he was a third order Carmelite. So he took this example from John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila and St. Therese of Lisieux, who speak in all of their writings about this total renunciation of self and embracing the cross. And that's what he did with his whole life. And that sort of just sets such a fine example for each one of us to follow. Even to the very end of his days, he did that. So it sets for us a pretty high bar to follow, but this is what Jesus has asked of each one of us.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that title that he has, which is Saint Pope John Paul the Great, is beautifully put because Christ says, if the one that wants to be the greatest among you must become your servant. And that's exactly what he did, put himself in service of the church. And there's another quote that's often misattributed to him, but you can see why people would think that he said it, is that you were not made for comfort, you were made for greatness.
Yeah.
But that's because that's just how he was not a man who sought after comfort in any way.
Yeah.
He was gunning for greatness, and he did that by being a complete servant and slave to all.
Yeah. And we see in the other readings this weekend, so in particular Paul's letter to the Romans, where he speaks about being baptized in Christ, being baptized in his death. And I actually did a baptism this weekend of a young child. And I said in my homily, and the family were there with this sort of 8-week-old baby. And I said, we don't often, when we think of baptism, think of death. But St. Paul is telling us, and Jesus tells us in the gospel, that this is what is required. And that baptism is a dying to the world. This child is not going to be a child of the world. This is a child of God. And the child is plunged in the waters, or now sort of waters poured over their head, and they are born to new life. And St. Paul tells us that if we go into the tomb, then we are raised with him, and we receive his glory. And this is what happens in the sacrament of baptism, but it actually happens in all of our sacraments. And this is a really important thing. Like when we go to confession, we're dying. There's this dying to ourself, dying to our pride, dying to the way of the world, dying to our sins. And we rise, we come out a new life again. It's the same with marriage. We spoke last week about being at weddings. Marriage is a dying to the self and coming out on the other side as a couple to become one. This is new life. It's the same with ordination to the priesthood. We see that the priest actually lies prostrate on the altar. And it's the same position that he takes on Good Friday, but this dying to self, the most humbling of positions that a priest can take. If we enter into the priesthood, it's about dying to ourself and rising with the new life that Christ offers us. So there's this great sort of symbolism in all of our sacraments. And that's a reminder that this following of the Lord in this way that St. Paul and that the Lord himself speaks of this weekend is something that we must do each and every day. It's not just a once-in-a-lifetime choice, but it's something in particular in our vocations, but also just in our baptismal call, that this is a responsibility we must take up each and every day. And someone that we know has done that quite in a quite extraordinary way is Gerry, who's our
Gerry.
guest this evening, and she's patiently been waiting.
Oh, you've done so well. I'm sorry. Look, we just talk, Father.
I know, this is what happens when we actually sit face to face rather
it's
than
nice. It is nice.
Across the desk from each other. So we're just going to
bring you in, Gerry.
We're going to bring her in. She's patiently been waiting there in the
So good. I hope she's still there.
I hope she hasn't given up on us and gone somewhere else.
Oh, Gerry.
Hello.
Oh, you're sideways.
Gerry, you're sideways.
I'm sideways.
Is
Is that better?
Turn it again.
And
Turn
one
it
more
again.
time.
One more.
There we
Yeah,
go.
there we go.
There we go.
Welcome.
There we go. Great to see you, Gerry. Thanks for being with us tonight. For those of you who don't know Gerry grew up here in Melbourne, in the Archdiocese of Melbourne, in Taylor's Lakes in the western suburbs.
Yeah, the west side.
West side.
Good on.
And has
I
just
agree.
come back from a couple of years on Net Ministries.
Yeah.
It was 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, 2018 and 2019.
Far out. Where did you go?
I was sent in 2018 to North Rockhampton, which is about 8 hours north of Brisbane. And in 2019, I was sent to Bundaberg, which is about 4 or 5 hours north of Brizzy.
They make the ginger beer, yeah?
Yeah, they do. They make
you go-
ginger beer. They're famous for their brew drinks and Bundaberg sugar. You've heard of it? Bundaberg rum as well, if you prefer the
Yeah,
alcohol.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's a good drink.
A bit of both.
Bit of
So
both.
we've just been talking about the need that Jesus has for each one of us to die to ourselves, and I suppose going and being a missionary in another part of the world is very much about dying to yourself. Can you tell us what inspired you in the first place to go and join Net?
Yeah, for sure. Growing up in Melbourne, I had met and seen a lot of the Melbourne Net team. So they would run retreats for my primary school and my high school. And there was something about them that just made me really curious. And as I got older, I actually ended up getting to know them. And I realized that the life they were living was really intentional. It was very Christ focused and they were just such joyful people. And as I got older, I kind of explored my faith more. My faith kind of became something that I really enjoyed and something I found solace in. And that inspired me to share that with others, knowing that life is not perfect and life is really hard, but that like through Christ and through allowing him to be part of my life, I could actually use that as a testimony to share and to inspire other people to possibly consider him to be a bigger part of their lives.
What was one of the challenges?
Dude, that reading from today about leaving your mother and father behind, totally relate to that. I think coming from the family I come from, the expectation after year 12 was very much to like go to uni and then to get a job and then start a family and to live life in a very structured way. So doing a year of mission, which turned into 2 years of mission, was very unconventional, very countercultural and just really confusing. It was like, okay, I've heard of missionaries before, but what does that mean? And that means that I'm not going to see my parents. It means that I'm not going to go to university. It means that I leave Melbourne, which is a place that I call home. And it means that I make sacrifices, that I say no to some things to say yes to something I truly believe God is calling me to. And that's hard. That's really hard. But I think God really put it on my heart over the course of so many years to see the fruit of other people saying yes and to bring that joy and that hope.
Is there a horror story? What
do you mean by horror story, Father?
Oh, sort of something that surprised you or shocked you.
Ooh. I think just how there's this one time, okay, my team and I, we as a Net team, we try and pray every day, and we pray alone, but we also pray as a team together. And there was one morning in particular where we were all praying before ministry. And we usually like to pray charismatically, and I play guitar, so we serve the team, and I serve the team, through playing worship, and we sing together and just praise God. There was one time that I was playing a song and we were praising God, and the song was particularly really exciting. We were really getting into it, really honing into, King David's joy. And as my teammate is starting to dance, she actually falls through a floor and her guitar gets stuck in the floor. And at first we're all shocked, like the guitar stops, everyone's jaws drop. We're like, what has just happened? Like there's a hole in our floor and there's a person in it. And we slowly get Rachel up, and there's some laughter to begin with. It's kind of funny, and then we realize like oh my gosh, she's crying. And the poor thing was so hysterical. We were so stressed because we were like, oh my gosh, we had ministry this morning, and I had 2 phones in my hand and I was calling 5 different people. Like, what do I do? There's a Canadian who needs healthcare service. Like, I'm 19. Like, what do I do? And in those moments, like, and I think in our humanness, it's like, oh my gosh, like, Jesus, what do we do? And luckily we had amazing help. We have an awesome team, doctor, and as a team we were able to really get through it. Rachel ended up being okay, and the hole in the floor got fixed, and we actually got new flooring, which was very nice. So I think we understand that, you know, things happen, like, tangibly, people get sick, people get hurt, but all things work together for God's good. So yeah.
You started that by saying a horror story. What do you mean? That is a
ticks the
great
box.
horror story. Falling through the floor in morning prayer. That's more horrific than anything that's ever happened to me. So
that's good. That's an intense praise and worship session.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you're a guitarist. We've got a budding cellist here. Have you got any tips for Brendan? Because it's 2 weeks in a row that we haven't actually got an update on the cello. But have you got any tips for Brendan, or I suppose anyone else who might be listening to the podcast who is a budding musician?
Yeah. You know, practice does not make perfection, but it does make progress. And I actually, on net, I got the opportunity to play guitar almost every day. And I did take guitar lessons before that, but I think just playing a little bit every day has helped so much. And challenging yourself to use opportunities to try that. I used to be so afraid of singing and playing guitar at the exact same time. And I have these like vivid memories as a year 10 student, just shaking in my boots in our ministry band, thinking, why in the world would I try and do this at the same time? And my APRE, or my faith and mission director, is encouraging me, but I don't really believe in myself right now. But you know what? You need those people who are going to encourage you. So find yourself an accountability buddy who can push you to try. And maybe it's performing at a friend's gig, or maybe it's accompanying a friend at music ministry. You know, you just got to really challenge yourself, because those opportunities are going to come and go, and they're only going to make you stronger and better. And even if they don't, you learn a lot of humility. So just give it a try, Brendo. You know?
Thank you. I will be performing live next Sunday night live. Forget the talking. I'll just be doing my own concert. Is that right, Gerry? Is that what I should be doing?
You can be the Tiny Desk NPR version in Melbourne, you know.
I don't even know what's that?
NPR.
Oh, there's like this National Public Radio, and they get like these really big artists to perform at a really tiny desk, and they kind of have a back similar to yours. They've had like Taylor
Religious
Swift.
books.
Not necessarily religious, but it's pretty groovy. They've had some, the Catholic version of it. Yeah.
I could be the Catholic cellist.
We just did Brendan's top 5 Catholic books. Have you got a top book? What are you reading at the moment?
Oh, at the moment, I'm not really reading much other than
a podcaster.
But recently, I've read The Way of Perfection by St. Teresa of Avila, and it was really good. I think my favorite Christian Catholic book of all time is probably Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis.
Okay.
I read it when I was probably in year 12, and it literally changed my life. So incredible metaphors. C.S. Lewis is the author of The Chronicles of Narnia, and Mere Christianity is like solid, like just exploring so many beautiful illustrations of God and who he can be, you know.
I think if we're going to put Lewis on the list, I would also put the Screw Tape Letters, because I don't know if you haven't read those. Well worth the read.
Yeah.
JC is continuing to troll the combox and has just, of course, mentioned Lord of the Rings, which is Tolkien, but a friend of Lewis, wasn't he? Tolkien and Lewis.
They sat down.
Had
a drink.
Had a few beers together.
Had a few beers. You know, fun fact, Tolkien didn't like any of C.S. Lewis's writing. Like his fiction stuff, he definitely didn't like. He thought it was a bit too direct. Like that whole Aslan lion is Jesus and dying and like sacrificing himself and then coming back to life. Yeah, you thought that was a bit too obvious.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, Gerry, we're just completely ignoring you here for a moment. Give us a moment, but I'm gonna make myself a whole lot of enemies right now.
Don't say it. No, stop. You have to like Lord of the Rings.
I've never read Lord of the Rings.
I haven't either.
Yes.
I wish I could represent the rest of like Catholic society and say like, that's shocking. I can't believe. Are you even cat? But I haven't actually read it either.
Oh.
No, I was listening to the audiobook.
And the concurrent viewers of the podcast just goes from 28 to 0.
Yeah, look. We should get Peter Jackson on.
Shout out to Peter Jackson. Gerry, what about, okay, so you're a musician. What about a Spotify playlist?
Oh, what do you mean by that?
I'm always looking for good playlists. I have Spotify going quite regularly in the car and around the house. So I'm always looking. I've been working my way through Chillin' on a Country Road.
Oh no!
Which is a really great playlist.
Chillin' on a Country Road.
It's
got a
driving
song?
my housemates a little bit crazy. So
is that a pun?
Ha! So Gerry, are you listening to anything on Spotify or iTunes or whatever channel it is?
Always. I actually make my own playlists because I'm that music obsessed. And I've actually gone into the stage of like organizing my folders in Spotify and creating my own thumbnails, which is when you really hit the stage of commitment with Spotify, which is pretty
like you're
custom thumbnails. Ooh.
Yeah, I love
plug
it.
Us. What's you got plug one.
Plug one. Oh, there's an awesome artist from Bendigo called Timothy Lee, and he's got a couple new albums and singles at the moment. His single called Oh My Lover is a beautiful, just serenading like anthem, and I have been just playing that on repeat during ISO.
There you go. And he's a local.
Yeah, he's
Bendigo.
a local. He's Father Rob, actually. Father Rob Galea, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Who's the saint that most inspires you?
Oh, well, it's going to be a tie between Saint Therese of Lisieux, who you were talking about before, but also St. Mary of the Cross MacKillop. St. Therese is a missionary. Like, there's been so many aspects of her story that I think I can relate to. Just not really sure of where God's calling her, but also feeling so convicted of calls in her life, but not 100%, and leaving her family behind, but also being so committed to pursuing the unknown almost. And I think St. Mary of the Cross MacKillop, I went to a primary school after her namesake, so I've kind of heard about her ever since I was little, but she's just been such a powerful woman who has pioneered Catholic education in Australia. Her story has really encouraged me, especially like working in regional Queensland. A lot of the schools in that area were started when Mary MacKillop walked around and was like, I reckon this plot of land could be a Catholic school and kids can attend and, learn our basic literacy and numeracy skills. She's just such a powerhouse and
champion, yeah.
Just a fair dinkum woman. Like, honestly, Mary Mac is solid.
Yeah. Aussie as.
Oh, wow.
She was Irish, but we'll take her.
How's uni been for you during this period of COVID-19?
You know what? I'm a first year uni student, and it's kind of funny because a lot of people are like to me, I wonder how it is. Is it crazy? And in all honesty, I don't really know any better. I was on campus for 3 weeks and still trying to find where my classes were. And then the next moment, it's like campus is shut down, everything's online.
True.
Hasn't been too bad personally, I think, for me, because a lot of my subjects are humanities and social science based. The major subject that is a bit difficult is learning guitar. Guitar Zoom tutorials are a little bit weird, but our lecturers are committed to doing the best they can. So I'm pretty grateful. And yeah, it also means that in between classes, I get to call friends, which is something I'd never thought of doing at uni. Like, I'm so busy running around that now I can call a friend in Canada while I'm on my lunch break, or, text a friend in the middle of a Zoom, which probably isn't the best learning technique, but yeah.
Wait, hold on. Are you studying guitar at university?
Yeah.
Whoa, you can do that? Can you study cello?
You'd have to ask the University of Melbourne.
Oh, that could be the next step.
Has there actually been any? Have they announced what's going to happen second semester? Or are you going to be back on campus, or is there still more online learning ahead?
By the sounds of it, it sounds like it's going to at least start online, if not progress to in person. But given the restrictions not really being loosened, it doesn't look like it. So I wouldn't be surprised if uni's online for the rest of the year. That's just what it is.
And now you've been a faithful listener of the podcast since the very beginning, so we thank you for that. So you're going to know this question, so hopefully you've got an answer, because we've asked all of our guests this over the last few weeks, and that is that question about coming out of COVID-19, coming out of isolation. Has there been something that you've learned about yourself during this time that you're going to try and incorporate in your daily life going forward?
Yeah. I think usually I'm like so much of an extrovert and I love hanging around friends and catching up with mates. And, you know, sometimes being in my room isn't too bad. Sometimes just giving myself permission to relax is okay. And in all honesty, COVID kind of forced me to stop, which for someone like me who loves being busy and loves starting projects or visiting the coolest new kebab shop in town, like it's actually so good for me to just be. And I think, yeah, just prioritizing prayer as well. Like I have nowhere to rush to. I don't have a train to catch. I don't have a class to attend at exactly 8 a.m. in the morning. I can literally just, you know, sit and eat my breakfast and pray. And that's been a really big grace to start my day off that way as well. Yeah.
You get a taste of what it would have been like before technology, I reckon. Things would have been... Yeah. Things would have been slower
by
back
spending
in the day.
your whole day on Zoom.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb, mate. No, but I mean,
You're not
taking
having a
things
good
slower.
night's
Taking things slower, you know, like eating breakfast and not having to worry about, you know?
Oh,
No,
yeah,
I take it
true.
back. I take it back. That's really silly.
Gerry has just told us that she's that far in the Spotify sort of circle that she's creating thumbnails and playlists, and you think that she's having an experience of what the world was like before technology. Oh, Gerry.
Oh, wait, hold on. You said what best kebab shop? Where?
Yeah.
In the West, tell me. I need to know.
Always in the West, first and foremost.
Yeah, true.
So,
We know how to make a kebab.
Got to get a good kebab in the West. I personally recommend Roxy Kebab in Deer Park, which is on Ballarat Road from memory. They serve some pretty good kebabs, awesome HSP, solid. Yeah.
What's
oh, here we go.
What's a kebab? What is a kebab? Now, is it meat on a stick, or is it something in like a flatbread sort of business, like with a bit of mayo?
If the combox didn't go wild before, now it's going wild. It's like Brenda doesn't know what a kebab is. Furlong Road Kebabs, says JC. That's...
He said kebabs.
There's
Izzy Smith. Yeah, good question, Brendan. It's true. Because if someone said, let's get kebabs, and you're like, yeah, that's true, and you're thinking the meat on the stick.
No, it's
Yeah.
wrapped in a pita bread and in foil, and
Yeah.
it's like a souvlaki.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you... There's a skewer. There's meat on the skewer. What do you call that?
That's meat on a skewer.
Wrong. That's a kebab.
Yeah, do you know every other podcast does the sort of banal, sort of lame conversation at the beginning of the podcast?
I think this is the highlight. This is what we should be aiming for.
We've
We should get the other stuff out of the way. Evangelization. I'm just kidding.
To have completely
I'm so sorry.
flipped it around on his head.
Can you save it?
Oh, Gerry, I apologize. Like, really.
That's all good, mate. I'm just glad we're having this intervention for Brendan of
Thank you.
how he needs to be educated about kebabs.
Yeah,
So
the basics of human experience.
in your journey of understanding what a kebab is and what a kebab can be. You know what? The concept here for you. Once we're out of self-iso, mate, I will show you the best kebab shop in the West.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
You're coming too, Father.
Really good news, though, hopefully, for those of you who are listening in Melbourne, and I know, Gerry, you'd be good to hear about this as well. We saw the cathedral was open this week. Even under the current restrictions, the cathedral here reopened for Mass. So I think there's a really big hope that in the next... I'm not predicting anything, but I would hope that as these next restrictions lift, that we might see Holy Hour on Thursday night return.
Yes.
So, and there's nothing like Cafe on Burke, because they do a really good open kebab on their menu. Shout out to Cafe on Burke.
And if there's any listeners, podcast or live stream, that you haven't been to a Holy Hour, young adult, 18 to 35, I think is the age range, but please do come. It's such a good event, and I've been missing it so much, and Gerry's been coming along as well since she's been back from net, and it's good crowd.
Okay, so we're all out of time, Gerry. Brendan and his kebab story took over the last 5 minutes of your interview, so my greatest apologies for that, but thanks for joining us tonight. It's been lovely to have a chat.
Thank you so much for having me, boys or men or brothers.
Thank you so much, Gerry.
You
got it, girl. Woman, sister. God bless you, Gerry.
Cheers. Well, Brendan, thank you. It's been what it's been. It's been great.
Look, I'm not a professional, but it's been fun, and I'm really curious if people give us some feedback. What do you think about format? Because we've changed it up in the past couple of weeks.
We're mixing it up.
We went from Zoom. We went to the couches, which I recognize that like seating position is quite an awkward thing when you're on camera. You're trying to, anyway. And now we're here with two of whatever these microphones are. So let us know what you think.
We're just keeping it fresh.
Keeping it fresh. Real. Keeping me on my toes.
If you haven't already, make sure you head over to the Facebook page, facebook.com/Melbourne Praise. And if you are watching live, you can also download the podcast from melbournepraise.podbean.com or on Google Play or Apple Podcasts.
And invite your friends to like on Facebook as well.
Share it around.
Share it around. No, please do, because like that's how we're going to get the message out, you know? And that's how, like...
Do we really want the message out about...
No, we got to get the message out, because if we're going to get some good, nice guests... Oh, Jason Everett, I would really love...
Jason Everett, The Crunch. Who else are we... Matt Frad. We're putting the call out.
Because we got to get Melbourne on the map as well.
Yeah,
people got to know about Melbourne. We got to look down the line, bringing some good speakers. We've had Jason Everett, but let's get some. Yeah, let us know. Let us know any recommendations.
Chuck some stuff in the com box.
Please
feel free to send us an email if there's something that you'd like us to tackle. We spoke about kebabs tonight, so we're running pretty dry on content. So if there's something in particular about the Catholic faith or the church here in Melbourne or the spiritual life that you would like us to talk about, drop it in the com box this evening or send us through an email. We'd love to have a chat about it going forward. But that's it. That's the full hour. We're not going to go any longer because
I will start talking about kebabs
once
again.
We got to meat on a stick, we'd
just...
yeah. Okay. God bless. Have a good
God
weekend.
bless you, Father. God
See you
bless
next
everyone.
Sunday.